So in this video, I want to discuss about Season 4 of DanMachi and the previous seasons just for context sake, and bringing up some discussions that I've seen online about Season 4, just different thoughts and opinions, and putting my own 2 cents in there. So if you do or don't agree, definitely tell me in the comment section down below, as this is a sort of thought-provoking discussion that everyone can interact with, of course, keeping it civil as always. And of course, there is the playlists for more DanMachi content, light novel stuff on the main story, the side story, and then of course the character analysis, not just on DanMachi, but also Shield Hero, Overlord, Eminence, In the Shadow, and then of course Jobless Reincarnation. So would love the support. Of course, if you do like this kind of content, tell me down below, like, subscribe. And getting into the video, discussing about the dungeon itself, because one of the things I have seen is some people are discussing like, oh, is Season 4 spending too much time in the dungeon? And this is a much longer season. Each previous season has generally been around 12 to 13 episodes with an OVA fan service kind of thing. And so there has been parts of those seasons where Belle and the gang will go into the dungeon, spend a couple of episodes in there, and generally they'll come out and then that's kind of it. There have been some parts where it's much more longer and shorter, depending on kind of what that tale entails, as so to say. But this season is a longer season, and it came with 2 parts, and it is a big, epic, long journey in the dungeon. And so I've seen some comments, and I don't know if this is just anime only. I assume, based on the observation of the comments, that it's anime only. But some of them have noted that they felt that it was too long in the dungeon. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, yes, observation that it is a long time in the dungeon compared to other previous journeys. Yes, they are technically correct that it is been a lot longer in the dungeon, but I don't see that as a negative thing. And one of the reasons for that is at the beginning of each of the episodes, there's always a bit of a backstory on a certain elf that Belle is very close to, that is also journeying in the dungeon with, that has a long backstory of what is going on currently. So you get a bit of a backstory, and then you're kind of thrown into the current situation. But it isn't just one group, it's multitude of groups, and most of the time it can be up to 3 different groups sort of interacting in the dungeon, different places, whether it's the support or the sort of rescue squad getting down there, or it's the main squad with all the others, with Wealth building his new sword, more magic sword, and then of course you've got Belle and the elf, them going deeper and deeper and deeper to the dungeon, dealing with what the big issue is for this story. So you've got different angles of the dungeon. Now, it's not just that you're dealing with different angles and then the sort of backstory at the start. You've also got this thing about the dungeon that I really love, and that is, as you go deeper and you go to different components or layers to the dungeon, there is a very different atmosphere. It's not just some moldy corridor where you're going from area to area and it's all the same look, same monsters, maybe a slight different variation or a color different variation. It kind of reminds me of those old kind of games where you go deeper and deeper and deeper and it's just a different color, but kind of the same sort of feel to it, the same narrow hallways. That's not the case with the dungeons. It can be quite open and vast, and it feels like it's its own ecosystem. And in a way, it is its own ecosystem. Big waterfalls, lava pits, battle arenas, green lush landscapes, safe zones, non-safe zones, and then there's of course some rocky areas as well. So each sort of different layer to the dungeon has its own feel, and it's not just the aesthetics, but it's also the monsters as well. And the monsters get progressively more challenging and in a sense more intelligent, because as you're going down they will do some much more insane stuff that you've got to be much more aware of. So the challenges get much more difficult as you go down. And that just adds a different feel to the dungeon as you're going down in the story. So as the story progresses throughout the season, the journey becomes interesting as it goes down. That being said, you look at previous seasons, every time they've gone into the dungeon, and I'm not going to try and spoil, but take the hints as they are, every time they've gone into the dungeon, they've done some type of journey, whether as epic and as grand as this. They've always gone into the dungeon, done a major task, and then come out, and then they do other things as well on the surface. And so it's just one of those that this is a much more bigger and grander journey that is meant to put a lot of weight behind what is going on. And because of the backstory behind it and the gravity, yes, it's going to take a little bit longer. But also another thing to note is that this season has followed the light novels very, very closely. It is not skimped on any details. It has gone as close to the source material as we've ever seen. Previous seasons have skimped on some details, kind of cut some stuff out, which I've noted on many videos, even though I get some people saying, oh, well, not that much. You'd be surprised how much does get skimmed off over time. I mean, there are a lot of videos out there that go over the differences between the light novel and the anime, and it does build up over time. And I'm not even counting these sort of side story stuff that's in the main story volumes, like all those little extra little chapters where it goes over little backstories and little side stories for the other characters that are associated with Belle, not even including them, just the details of the story that even the anime is trying to follow. There are little things that are just slimmed off that kind of add up over time. This season really feels like they are trying to go as close to the source material as possible. Of course, nothing is going to be one-to-one, but I really feel like they went all out on this season, which is why I really love it. And I just feel like it's such a fun and grand and epic season. My only complaint is that I have to wait a week for each new episode, which is the only downside. It's kind of one of those where you really just want to watch everything in one go, because it just feels like, it kind of reminds me of those Showman series where you watch something and you just feel like you've only just taken a little nibble into that episode and then it's over, and then you're like, oh, I want more. That's the only downside. But that's a good thing. That means you're wanting more. That means the story feels engaging, interesting, and it's got you hooked. This does give me a little bit of hope that we may get maybe a side story on Sword Princess, which is Aiza's side story, which does with Loki and all of those. I'm hoping that maybe we will get maybe a season 2 for that, if they're really this determined to follow the source material and really going this hard at it with a much more longer season. I am hopeful for that. It's not guaranteed, but I think this would really complement the main story anime if they follow the side story and do a second season and really go hard on that, because there's some really epic journeys that also happen in the dungeon, and it really shows an interest in different sides of the dungeon as well. Of course, not everything is in the dungeon. There is always the stuff that goes on the surface, and that's true for the main story and the side story as well. So I don't feel like the dungeon has been overdone. I can understand why some people might kind of feel that way, because it is a much more bigger, grander journey. But always remember that after these kind of big journeys, there's a lot of time that they do spend on the surface doing other little activities as well. So I do very much look forward to the next season as well, because I feel like the next season, which would be season 5, will be very, very interesting as well, and I think a lot of fans are really going to love that season as well. I always feel like DanMachi, for me, gets better as it goes on. It starts off, kind of a little bit slower than the rest. I'm not saying it is slow, I'm just saying it starts off slower than the rest, and then it builds up and it kind of just escalates into this really big, grand, epic journey that many characters go on that have these intertwining different fates together. So love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think of season 4 of DanMachi so far? And of course, check out the other videos if you want more DanMachi content, and other, of course, anime light novel content as well. And of course, hit the like, subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful nerds in the next video.